There's a particular kind of silence that tells you everything before a single word is spoken. Not the comfortable kind. Not the quiet of a Sunday morning, when you're both still half asleep. And the coffee's brewing, and the world hasn't started yet. I mean the other kind, the kind that lands in a room like something heavy dropped from a height. The kind where you walk through your own front door and know, before you've even taken your shoes off, that the version of your life you went to work with that morning no longer exists. I've replayed that Tuesday in November more times than I can count. The drive home from the office. The parking spot I always take. The way I could already smell something was wrong before I could name it. I don't know how else to describe it other than that. A smell, like the air pressure in the apartment had changed. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand that Tuesday, you have to understand everything that came before it. I grew up in Mississauga, one of two boys. My brother is 3 years older than me. I'm not going to pretend our childhood was some hallmark disaster. My parents worked hard, we always had enough. Nobody raised a hand at anyone. But there's a particular brand of quiet unfairness that doesn't require shouting to do its damage. It just settles into you, layer by layer, the way sediment does. And by the time you're old enough to name it, it's already part of your foundation. My brother was the one with the easy laugh. The one who could charm a room without even trying. He'd walk into a family dinner at my aunt's place. And within 10 minutes, everyone would be laughing at something he said. I'm not bitter about that. Or I wasn't, back then. You accept the shape of your family the way you accept the weather. You don't question it, you just dress accordingly. What I did notice, and could not notice, was how my parents moved differently around him. With me there was always a slight tension in their voices, a weighty. When I got a 90 on a test in grade 9, my mother said, "What happened to the other 10%? When my brother got a 75, she said, "You know he tries so hard. He could do no wrong. I could do no right." I don't think they were conscious of it. That almost made it worse. I learned early to be self-sufficient. Figured out my own university applications. My own student loans through OSAP. Got a co-op placement at a civil engineering firm in Hamilton in my third year that turned into a full-time offer before I graduated. I was proud of that. I still am, honestly. I built what I have without a safety net, which meant I knew exactly how much it weighed. My brother, to his credit, was not a bad person in any obvious way. He held down jobs. He was funny at Christmas. He remembered birthdays. He just had this quality. This assumption that things would work out for him. And the frustrating part was that they usually did. Because enough people in his life arranged themselves to make sure of it. My parents were the primary architects of that arrangement. I met my girlfriend 6 years ago, at a mutual friend's birthday thing in Kensington Market. She was standing by the kitchen window, eating a piece of cake with a fork. And looking mildly annoyed at the music, and I thought that was the most relatable thing I'd ever seen in my life. Her name was Simone. She was a nurse at St. Michael's, which I quickly learned meant she had approximately zero patience for nonsense. And could read a person's actual emotional state the way most people read a menu. Quickly, accurately, and with low tolerance for anything that didn't make sense. We moved in together after 2 years. Bought a condo in the Junction 3 years after that. A real stretch financially but doable, with a fixed-rate mortgage. Both of us contributing, proper budget, the whole thing. That was probably the proud day of my adult life, honestly. Standing in that empty unit with the keys in my hand thinking. We did this. I proposed in the spring. She said yes before I'd finished the sentence. Which she still claims is because she already knew what I was going to say. And didn't want to listen to me stumble through it. We set a date the following September. 14 months to plan. Our families had dinner together that summer. At a restaurant in Yorkville. Both sets of parents, my brother, her sister. It was a good night. I remember thinking this is what it's supposed to feel like. Here's what I didn't know. My brother had already been spending time with Simone without me. Not in any way I'd tracked or had reason to be suspicious of. They had met enough times through me that them crossing paths independently wasn't alarming. He worked downtown. She worked downtown. But there is a category of time that exists outside what you're told about, and that's the category where things rot. I found out the way people find out about things they weren't supposed to know. I came home early from a site visit that got cancelled. Some permit issue with the city. Not unusual. It was maybe 2:30 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. The kind of gray November afternoon that makes Toronto feel like it's made entirely of concrete and disappointment. I used my key. I had no reason not to. There are things you cannot unknow. There are images that install themselves behind your eyes and don't leave. I stood in the doorway of my own bedroom, in my own apartment that I paid for, and I saw something that rewired me permanently. I want to be precise here because I think precision matters. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I went completely, totally. My brain did this thing where it tried several alternative explanations in rapid succession. You do that, apparently, when the reality in front of you is too large to accept immediately. And then it stopped trying, and just accepted it. My brother saw me first. He said my name. That was the moment I knew I would never be the same person I was when I walked in. I left the apartment. I don't actually remember making the decision to leave. I just found myself outside. On the street. And then I was walking. And then I was somewhere along Bloor with no memory of how I got there, and my phone was buzzing in my pocket and I didn't answer it. I stayed at a hotel that night. A Best Western near the Gardiner. I sat on the bed in my work clothes and stared at the wall, and at some point the wall went dark, because it had become night outside, and I hadn't turned any lights on. Simone called 11 times. My brother called 4 times. My mother called twice, which told me my brother had already made a phone call I hadn't authorized. I picked up for my mother on the second call the next morning. She sounded careful, like she'd had time to think. The conversation lasted maybe 8 minutes. And in those 8 minutes, she managed to say the following things: that she was very sorry this happened, that she was sure my brother hadn't meant to hurt me, that these things were complicated, that family was family, and that she hoped I would try to find a way through this for everyone's sake. She did not say, "What can I do for you?" She did not say, "I'm on your side." She did not say your brother had no right. I think for a long time, I had told myself a story about my family, where the inequality of my childhood was somehow separable from who they actually were. Like it was a tick, a blind spot, but underneath it they would show up when it mattered. That phone call ended that story. My father called that afternoon. He is a man who expresses emotion, the way some people express a foreign language. Haltingly, with effort, always slightly off. He said he was sorry I was going through this. He said my brother was going through something too. He said he hoped I wouldn't make any permanent decisions, while I was upset. Permanent decisions. I have thought about that phrase a lot since then. The idea that the decision being made here was mine. That I was the one with power, the one choosing something, the one who needed to be cautioned against permanence. Not my brother, who had made a very permanent decision when he started whatever it was he started with Simone. Not my parents, who were choosing, in real time, which version of this situation they were going to accept. Me. I was the one they were worried would go too far. I moved out of the condo within 2 weeks. Simone moved in with her sister temporarily. I found a rental in Etobicoke. Nothing special, a 1-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a building that smelled faintly of someone else's cooking, in a way that I came to find oddly comforting. I took my stuff. I did not make a scene. I did not post anything on social media. I did not call my parents crying. I did, however, call a lawyer. I wanted to understand my options regarding the condo. We weren't married, but we had a cohabitation agreement, and my contributions were well documented. My name was on the title. These things matter. I'm not going to walk through the legal details here, but the short version is that I was protected, and after several weeks of back and forth, Simone bought out my share. It took time and it was unplanned and professional, the way those things are, but I was not left without options. What I hadn't accounted for was that my family would respond to my moving as if it were an act of aggression. Not the affair. My moving. My mother sent me a long text about how I was withdrawing from the people who love you. My brother sent me a voicemail, which I could not get through, without stopping it every 30 seconds. In which he described his feelings at length and then, near the end, said the words, "I hope you can forgive me someday." In the tone of someone who considers having said it to be sufficient. My grandmother called from her house in Guelph and asked me why I was causing trouble. Causing trouble. My aunt, my father's sister, who I had always been close with, called me and asked if I would consider coming to Christmas. She said it in the way people say things when they've already thought through your counter-arguments and preemptively dismissed them. She said, "It would mean a lot to your parents." Not to her, not because it was right. Because it would mean something to the people who had just spent 2 weeks making me feel like I was the problem. I said I wouldn't be there for Christmas. I should say here that I told almost nobody what had happened. I had a few close friends who knew. One guy I'd been tight with since university, a colleague who I trusted. But I hadn't done any kind of social announcement. I was intensely private about it, partly because I'm a private person and partly because I had this awareness that the story, told out loud, would be received in a lot of different ways, by a lot of different people, and I didn't have the energy to manage anyone else's reactions, on top of my own. What I did do quietly was start to disengage. From group chats, from family functions, from the rhythm of being present in their lives. My brother texted me a few times. I read the messages and didn't respond. My mother tried to set up a dinner twice. I canceled both times. About 4 months after November, I got an offer at work that changed things practically. Our firm had recently merged with a larger one based in Calgary, and they were building out their Western Canada infrastructure division. My director asked if I'd consider relocating. Senior role, better salary, allowance for moving costs. The kind of offer that, if you're already looking at your current city, and feeling like every street has something on it that you need to not see for a while, makes immediate and obvious sense. I said yes. I told my parents I was moving via a brief email. I included my new city and my start date. I did not include my new address or my new phone number. Though in hindsight, and this is the part I've thought about more than once since, I probably shouldn't have told them even that much. I think I still had some reflex of ordinary civility, some muscle memory of what you're supposed to do when you're an adult child and you're changing major life circumstances. You tell your parents. The response to the email was a phone call from my mother that lasted 45 minutes and covered a lot of ground, including, why was I running away? Didn't I know this would kill my father? What would people think? My brother was very upset that I was moving. And this is the part that genuinely stunned me. You need to forgive your brother, the Bible says. And then I stopped listening. I want to pause here and just sit in that for a second. My brother and my then fiancée. In my apartment, that I was paying for. And the lesson my mother had landed on was that I needed to forgive him. I moved to Calgary in April. The city was different in ways I hadn't fully prepared for. Bigger sky than I was used to. The mountains, visible on clear days from certain streets, which never got normal no matter how long you looked at them. A different pace. Not faster or slower, just different. People held doors open, which sounds like a small thing. But when you've been living inside your own head for 5 months, the small things accumulate. I found an apartment in Mission. Nice neighborhood, walkable, close to the river pathway. I started running. Something I hadn't done since university. Partly because the pathways along the elbow were beautiful. And partly because I needed somewhere to put the energy that had nowhere to go.
I changed my phone number
about a month after arriving. I didn't tell anyone in my family. Work was genuinely good. The role was more expansive than what I'd had in Toronto. I was actually leading teams on municipal infrastructure projects rather than contributing to them. Which is a different kind of pressure. But also a different kind of satisfaction. I was good at it. My director told me, in my first performance review, that I was the best hire they'd made in 3 years. I sat with that for a while. Let it be true. I am not going to tell you I healed quickly or cleanly. That would be a lie. There were months where I went to work and did everything right, and came home and sat in my apartment, and felt the specter of someone who has had several major losses hit them, simultaneously. Not just Simone. The future I'd planned with Simone. Not just my brother. The idea of my brother I'd carried for 30 years. Not just my parents. The belief that they would eventually choose me, the one time I actually needed them to. I grieved all of it. Some nights were bad, some mornings were worse. I'm not ashamed of that. But here's what I didn't do. I didn't call my mother at midnight to tell her I was struggling. I didn't text my brother asking for some version of the conversation that would make this make sense. I didn't go back for Christmas. I didn't go back for my father's 62nd birthday dinner, to which I received a formal invitation handwritten, which I think was meant to move me, and instead, just made me tired. What I did do was build a life that had nothing to do with managing anyone else there. I made friends in Calgary, slowly. I'm not someone who makes friends fast, but they were real. A couple I met through a colleague who became people I'd call if something happened. A woman from my running group who had her own complicated family history, and laughed about it. In a way that felt like evidence that survival was possible. A guy at work, my age, from Edmonton, who became the kind of friend where you can sit in silence in the same room and it's not awkward. About a year after I moved, my aunt, my father's sister, the one who'd called about Christmas, reached out via email. She said she'd gotten my new email address from someone. She wasn't sure if I'd respond. She just wanted me to know she was thinking of me. She didn't ask me to forgive anyone. She didn't make the email about my family's feelings. She just said she missed me, personally, and that she understood if I needed spaces. I wrote back. We still email occasionally. She's the one member of my family I have any real contact with. My brother and Simone are apparently still together. I know this because the world is not that big and information travels. I found out through a mutual acquaintance about 8 months after the move. I will admit to you that my initial reaction was not noble. I sat with that information for a few days, and felt things I'm not particularly proud of. And then I did something I didn't expect. I let it go, not for them. Not because it was the right thing or the forgiving thing, but because holding on to it was like carrying a stone I'd been carrying for so long. I'd forgotten I was carrying it, and the moment I noticed how heavy it was, I just set it down. I don't know if they're happy. I don't know if the relationship is good. That's genuinely not my business anymore. And the realization that it's not my business was, in the strange arithmetic of all this, actually freeing. My parents and I are still, technically, estranged. My mother sent me a card at Christmas this past year. It had a Hallmark sentiment about family and time and love, and I read it and put it in a drawer. I didn't throw it out, which might mean something. Or might just mean I haven't cleaned out that drawer yet. My father called once from an unknown number. I figured it out only because he left a voicemail. He said he missed me and he was getting older, and he hoped I was okay. He sounded smaller than I remembered. I listened to the voicemail 3 times. I haven't called back. I'm not saying I never will. I'm not saying I will. What I know is this: I am 34 years old. I live in a city I chose. In an apartment I like, doing work that I'm proud of. I have people in my life who know me and stayed. I have a routine that is mine, and a version of the future that I actually want to be in. Nobody is waiting for me to forgive them so they can feel better about what they chose. Nobody is measuring me against someone else, and finding me insufficient. I built this. Quietly. Without applause. After something that could have finished me off if I had let it. The silence in my life now is different from the silence I felt walking into that apartment in November. This one is comfortable. This one is mine. I'm not telling you this so you'll feel sorry for me. Honestly, I don't want that. I'm telling you this because I think there are more people than you'd expect who know exactly what it feels like to be the one in your family who absorbs the consequences of everyone else's choices, and who then gets told that. The real problem is your attitude about it. If you're that person, I want you to know that the life on the other side of that, the one you build when you stop waiting for people to see it, is quieter than you expect, and better than you were told it could be. Some silences are emptiness. Some silences are room.